Greetings everyone and welcome in the last session for 2016 for Continuity Resilience and Service Management. The next round of PCB webinars will begin in January 2017 with premium topics and premium speakers. As usual, it is my pleasure to have you all here with us today. Thank you for joining for this very interesting webinar in where we'll discuss We've Been Hacked. Now, what's the BCP? My name is Rita Recepi, the Portfolio Marketing Manager for Continuity Resilience and Service Management. The presenter of this webinar will be Rinske Geerlings. She is an internationally known, award-winning consultant, speaker, and certified trainer in business continuity, IT management, disaster recovery, risk management, and information security with 20 years of global experience. As usual, at the end of this presentation, we have question and answer session, and we would love to hear from you. Therefore, I highly encourage you to submit any question or comment you may have during this webinar in the chat box of your control panel. Rinske will answer to all your questions accordingly at the end of the presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you will get insightful information from this webinar. Please, Rinske, you may start the webinar.
Hi everybody, good afternoon in Amsterdam, good evening in Australia, and good day in the rest of the world. I really look forward to to presenting to you in this virtual format. I understand there's people from all over the world participating in this webinar, about 200 of you, so I am very excited to share my knowledge that I've learned over the last 20 years. I'm showing my age here, so yeah, hopefully we'll get some good knowledge sharing happening, and please, like Erika said, please submit your questions. I really look forward to helping out with any issues you might have, whether it's related to information security or business continuity or any other processes that you're implementing in your organizations. Okay, so here's a little bit about myself. As you can see, I love BCP. I'm a certified Master 22301 ISO and also 31000 Lead Risk Manager 27001, and I've got a few other certifications under my belt. I apply those in very, very practical forms. I think some people implement standards in too much out-of-the-box sort of way, and in that sense, sometimes a standard can really break a process rather than make a process. So I think it's about combining the standards with real-life hands-on experience and using good hands-on tools to give people actually a sense of achievement rather than just ticking boxes and complying with something like the ISO standards. So a little bit about the background of my company. I started my business now just over 10 years ago. In fact, LinkedIn reminded me that it was 10 years old, and I got all these, how do you say, congratulations and things like that from everyone. So it's been going very, very strong. Started in Sydney, Australia, but really quickly became very focused also on Asia, Southeast Asia especially, and also all across Australia, obviously, and then quite soon after Europe, also East Africa, a little bit of South Africa, and in the Americas we're now quite active as well, and especially in South America. So it's really exciting. I run it as a business with freelance consultants all over the planet. Really enjoy that, and I learn from them and from their cultural background and experience, just like I give back what I know. So you can see here a little bit of background on, especially on regulations. I've got a lot of experience with banking, so the central bank regulations and things like that in Malaysia, in Australia, and also with the other ones in the Kenya sort of region or East African community. So there's a lot of standards that I could add to this list. Here you can see a few, but yeah, hopefully that resonates with some of you guys. So the way to do business continuity planning and also the other processes that we implement as a team, so business continuity sort of goes hand in hand with information security and risk management and disaster recovery. And how we normally offer it is either as a consultancy sort of project, but also very often training or combined in-house training and consultancy, also very, very common. And then obviously the drills or the business continuity rehearsals, testing, facilitation. So actually making all those plans really, really practical for people to experience. Will they work in practice? Because that's the key question. You can make lots of documents, but if it hits the fan, you need to know that your staff know what is the plan, rather than just reading out of a big document that they have to dig through. So that's the sort of components of our work that we do. And here you can see, not going into all that detail, but just showing you that the work that we do is with myself and my team is across all industries. So it's not like just IT or just information security or just particular sectors. We do work in government, in banking and finance, and then you can see here the rest of our sort of industries that we touched on. IT, telcos, manufacturing, oil and gas, education, hospitality, etc., etc. And these are all industries with their specific challenges, especially specific risks or specific threats. But we approach them very, very similarly in the sense of the process. So how do we implement, especially business continuity planning and risk management? They're very common factors between all those different sectors. Okay, this is the final little bit about myself. You can see the certifications. Some of you may have heard of processes like, or frameworks like COBIT and ITIL. That's from my history in IT management consultancy. And then you can see a few other things like the CBCP and MBCI. They're very specific Disaster Recovery Institute and Business Continuity Institute certifications. So that's enough about me. Just a quick slideshow. Now you might think this is just a joke, okay, and something funny, but what is behind this message is really, really important. And I'm going to show you the first one. Some of you may have seen this. So this is a sort of a mini disaster that's happened. In fact, it's a little white car that ended up in the water. Now, the next step is then, let's build a plan, ad hoc, you know, and we see that, oops, this plan, if it's not tested, it ends up like this. Now, what are we going to do next? Another Band-Aid solution. You know, and what's going to be the result of that untested plan? Well, you can see what's going to happen. And the last one, the last one is a hoax, okay? It's Photoshop. But the message here is, whilst it's funny, it's also, the first question is, can you really rely on an untested plan? And maybe it's even better not to have a plan at all and acknowledge that you're going to have to be really careful when you implement a solution. Some people have some sort of, very low quality plans or not tested or maintained, and they have this false sense of security that, we're going to pull out this plan that someone wrote 3 years ago, you know, and yeah, hopefully it will work. That's the kind of thing you see on the screen. You know, nobody's tested that, and that's a really, really big problem, because people will think, oh, we don't have to think about this, we'll just pull out the plan, but it has not been tested, so it will give you more dramas. And then the next question is, the white car, was it worth all this investment in recovery? And that's the question of BIA, or business impact analysis. Is you're trying to really identify what is the return on investment to actually try and make continuity provisions for lots of different things, or information security provisions or controls. You need to be really, really careful prioritizing the right things, because all these solutions and these controls, the preventative activities you can do, but also the post-incident activities, they're not cheap anymore. And there are lots of different options. You can find suitable options for the right sort of investment, but you need to be really specific on that and really prioritize the right things. So yeah, there's the 2 lessons in this funny little slideshow that hopefully I've opened your eyes a little bit, and to see we can't rely on an untested plan, and we have to prioritize where we're going to put our money. What are we going to invest in? So a question, back to you guys, okay? And webinars are a bit hard to ask questions in, but we have a little tool called a poll, and Rita is going to give you that poll in a minute. So my question is, how prepared would your organization be in this particular type of situation, like hacking attack on a hospital IT system, virus infects, and then the census? This is an Australian example where we actually found such a disastrous hacking incident that people didn't really have any response, and there was no BCP. And here are a few other examples of DDoS attacks. This one even brought down a whole transport system in part of Australia. So my question is, how prepared would your organization be if your systems were crippled by something like a hacking attack, a disastrous situation that was compromising your data? Give yourself 1 point if you're saying, oops, we'd really struggle. I don't think our organization is ready at all. Give yourself 2 points if you say, look, we're in a state of flux, we're going to be running around like headless chicken a little bit, but eventually we'll manage and hopefully we'll safeguard the reputation of our company. And 3 points is for those who say, well, we've tested the plan, we know our roles, we're ready with our media response, bring it on, we're happy. You know, we're waiting for this moment so we can show off how good we will be at this. So let's see what's going to happen with this poll. And if you guys can please respond, that would be really fantastic. I'm going to keep an eye on the results of that poll. And maybe we can sort of report on that while we go through the rest of the presentation. So let's see. We've got 51 of you guys online. So if you haven't heard the question, please have a look at this slide and give yourself 1, 2, or 3 points when Rita sent you this poll. So 1 point is you're struggling, 2 is you're managing but it's difficult, and 3 points is it's actually easy. We can handle this particular attack on our systems. Okay, the next slide. The next slide is showing you a bit of a interesting response. It basically says if you have a situation where you're running from a bear, do you have to be faster than the bear? Or, what I would believe is, in some situations, you only have to be faster than the rest of the people running from it. Now, that is the case in large-scale business continuity events, like major floods, fires, things like that, where loads of people are affected, loads of businesses are affected, and you are one of them, and if you do better than the other people responding, then you can really gain already some competitive advantage and some reputational enhancement. But the problem is, especially with information security events, they're often not of that kind of nature, of that scale, where people will go, yeah, we understand, you know, your whole industry is affected or your whole country is affected. That understanding and empathy you find usually with natural disasters and large-scale events that hit the whole city, earthquakes, fires, floods, and so on. But if you're just looking at your particular building or your particular business and you're affected by a data breach or a hacking incident, well, it's less likely that people will understand. So running from the bear faster than the rest of the people may not apply to your situations with information security. So we basically need a plan. Now, why should information security and business continuity go hand in hand? So why would you align them? Because, you know, there's a lot of effort going into BCP and information security, people doing IS workshops for years sometimes, like twice a week and half days per session. A lot of people are sitting in those meetings. It's a lot of work. And the same sort of effort some people put into business continuity, like BIA, etc. So how can you optimally align them that you don't duplicate that effort and that you're not going to annoy too many people out there who are going to contribute to multiple processes? So here are some reasons why you would want to align them as well. It's actually, these information security and IT-related risks are actually a core element of your whole business continuity suite of incidents and threats you need to worry about. So you can see here the global risks of highest concern from the World Economic Forum, and this is a particular forum that the United Nations have every year, early in the year. You can pull out the more recent reports if you go on their website. I don't know if they're ready yet, but they basically promote these or present these results. And this is not actual events, something to remember. Okay, these are what business people and larger government departments, what they globally fear and what they see as the biggest threats for the world. Now you can see that cyber attacks, data fraud or theft, and misuse of technologies and critical information infrastructure breakdown, this section here with the red boxes, you can see that it actually is growing in some of those segments, not the first two, but in the third or fourth, misuse of technology, critical information infrastructure breakdown, you can see it's growing, and the other two are to begin with already quite solid, quite big. So basically, these are issues that are important to the world. It's not just to a particular industry. Now here you can see a little bit more information from 2016. I found some different statistics there, and you can see here per country or region the cyber attacks and how they rank globally. So you see if you're in a particular region right now where you're calling in from, and have a look at how you're ranking against the rest of the world. You can see here the USA are affected really poorly, really badly I should say, and also parts of Europe very, very heavily affected by this cyber attacks issue here. You see a few in Asia, Australia is sort of mid-range at this point. And here you can see also why cyber attacks are certainly a concern. You can see here 41% of economies in which that risk appears amongst the top 5. So in 41% of the economies that are surveyed by the United Nations, you can see that that's a top concern. So a little bit more in terms of getting some buy-in from you guys on saying, hey, this is an important issue. I'm sure you guys are almost across the line by now, but you can see here a whole list of how this is ranking. So all the different information technology related impacts, mobile internet, automation of knowledge work, Internet of Things, cloud, all those sorts of issues at the bottom here you can see. And you can see the range of sized potential economic impacts. So there are substantial economic impacts for these types of threats. And these are in US dollar trillion annually. You know, so this is just not a one-off incident. This is annual costs of economic impact of these technologies. All right, so now we know that IT and cyber related issues are prevalent in the world. We now want to see some other key reasons to do BCP and information security properly. Now, and I'll show you these reasons because it's hard sometimes to get buy-in from people who think, oh, this will never happen to us, or oh God, this is such an effort, you know, to make all these processes and plans and provisions. If we never have an incident or a disaster, we've made all these plans for no reason, so why would we do it? So often in the work that I do with my team, we look for reasons that are immediate benefit related. Now, if I can convince a senior management team or an executive team or a board that what they're doing now in terms of preventing these issues or having continuity plans in place is going to help them immediately by better returns into their pocket right now, that really, really gives buy-in to these initiatives. So I recommend to all of you, if you're struggling getting buy-in and support, some of you guys may not know the term buy-in, but buy-in means basically people supporting your initiative and having enthusiasm. Well, if that's one of your struggles, think about what's in it for them right now. And these are some examples. The first one is cheaper insurance. In fact, we've got organizations in our client base that say that they can negotiate 8 to 10% discount on their insurance. And that's especially business interruption insurance. If they've got a good business continuity plan, disaster recovery, they can start negotiating those discounts right now. So from every year that they pay premiums, they can get those discounts. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea. The next one is use the fact that you've got great information security and business continuity plans. Use that now to get stakeholder confidence. If people know that your business is in there for the long run and that you don't get affected so quickly by an incident, they will do business with you more likely. The next one is compliance. Now, the only problem with compliance is it's the stick approach. And I always look for carrots. You know, the carrot and the stick. The stick is going to make people do it, but not going to make people love it. And my experience is, especially when working with auditors and so on, using the stick, as in we're going to be audited, so we need to do it, it also makes people do the bare minimum. It makes people just tick boxes, and it makes people go on holidays or hide under their desk when you're coming around to do this audit. Okay, and I don't know how many of you guys are auditors out there, but it's certainly a real problem. People don't want to participate if it's just for compliance. So we're looking for different ways to sell the concept. Now here you can see some of the other ways. So better decisions, if you have a proper business continuity process, including business impact analysis, quantifying some of your impacts, that means you can make better decisions on how you should invest. Competitive advantage is the next one then, and it links a bit to stakeholder confidence, but competitive advantage makes it even stronger. So for example, if I want to do business with my organization, if I want to do business with a bank or with another regulated institution, they're going to ask me, what is your business continuity plan? Because since a number of years now, regulated institutions have to prove that critical suppliers have a plan as well. So it's not just, hey, I'm a bank or an insurance company or a superannuation fund, I need to have a plan because the government gives me the audits every year. It also means now you have to show that your critical external third-party providers are also able to recover and continue their business. And these are part of the regulation, part of the third-party compliance aspect. So this is where you can really gain competitive advantage, even if you're not in that sort of regulated institution. And then the next one, better day-to-day business. Now, this is the philosophy where if you've got a plan for the really big disasters, like the big hack or the big business continuity event, it also makes you more capable to bounce back and to continue core business if there's a small disaster happening. Or you've got an upgrade to one system, for example, over the weekend. You can much easier pinpoint which users, which processes, which products will be affected by that particular upgrade or by that particular downtime on one of your systems or other parts of your organizational process. So even if it's a planned outage and even if it's not the whole business being affected by a big disaster, you can say, if it's a small one, well, we've got plans for the big ones, so we're also more prepared for the small disasters. And these are the more common things. They happen maybe weekly or fortnightly. So that's a real benefit for you guys as well. Okay, hopefully that helps you a little bit. Now these are a couple of examples on what we hear people say, okay? When a business continuity or security test is suggested, most people seem to be busy with high priority activities. So, the day-to-day business, making money, that kind of thing, And it's actually a problem we see in all industries. Now the next one is information security procedures are published on your intranet or in employment contracts, but if you surveyed your staff, you find that people quickly have forgotten it. So they've forgotten what is the emergency response procedure or what is our information security policy, or until something really happens and they're reminded of the importance of it, we find that even if you train people in the beginning of their employment, very quickly, within 6 months or so, it's almost useless what you did 6 months ago. You need to refresh it. If you don't refresh it, it almost ends up being, well, useless. The next one is one particular business unit never turns up, never comes to your annual exercises, like your business continuity exercises. Very common problem. And my experience is it's often the departments that are actually really critical to the rest of the business, and they think they're critical too, but they think also that they're too busy to do this kind of testing, and Saturday usually or evening of the week they think, nah, let other people test this, and we're too important. So very common problem, I find. And then the last one there on this slide is when presenting a proposal to optimize your off-site facility, the board or your executive team, they wonder why to invest money in a dead site. It's hard to get support for something that just costs money every week, every month, every year, and never gets used. So if you have a recovery site, the advice that I can give you is try and find a day-to-day use or week-to-week use of that site. Maybe for training purposes, maybe for conferences, maybe for something not time critical, so that at least you can get some revenue or at least some use out of it, and make sure that it's clear that if you do have a real disaster, that particular process stops and that you can use it for your recovery. But these are some ways to get some extra support. A couple of other mistakes and misconceptions. everyone's in the same boat when it comes to disasters like pandemics and terrorism and cyber. You know, this is a common mistake. People think the government will just tell us what to do, or, you know, we'll get some guidance from some other entities that have already sorted out what's the procedures. Well, in real life, we find that when the government tests pandemic, large-scale pandemic outbreaks, for example, or flu outbreaks generally, that they actually need a lot of support from business environment and from the community. In fact, in Australia, where I'm based, we actually have now a statement from the government saying everyone should be able to survive on their own for the first 72 hours into a disaster. So that means they may help you to some degree in that 72 hours, but very likely you're going to have to pull together your own maybe water supplies, electricity, food supplies for your staff or for yourself if you're a family. You know, so it's not so common anymore. We can just rely on the government. And especially when it comes to terrorism and cyber, I mean, the government has to communicate and get support from business and other sort of individuals. So it's not where we can just relax back. Now the next one is our external suppliers will rapidly deliver everything, you know, because we put it in the contract. This is the biggest misconception I've ever seen, and I've actually tested this when I was in a permanent role in banking. We tested our suppliers multiple times, and we found during BCP exercises, if we test those suppliers, wow, it's actually very, very common that their promises are not actually, well, not followed, you know, if there's a real incident. And that's a major problem because they write down these promises in contracts and in service level agreements very easily because they think, oh, well, we just want to get you as a client. But if it really goes, well, pear-shaped, if it hits the fan and they can't deliver, your customers are going to be angry with you. And you can't point the finger at those suppliers. You can't say, sorry, customer, we have a supplier that didn't perform the way they would or the way they should. And yeah, therefore we're not going to give you your products and your services. No customer in this day and age is going to accept that anymore. So they will wonder, why didn't you have alternate suppliers? Why didn't you have a continuity plan? And the other problem is, if many customers are being promised certain things by that supplier, by that vendor, for example, let's say IT suppliers promising that you get hardware within 1 day or something. If you have a major, let's say a flood or earthquake, something that affects a whole big area, or a particular industry en masse, you find that those promises are not actually kept and the priorities are not clear. It's like, who gets this product first? And I've heard people commenting after some of the major floods in the world, they counted on getting new equipment, like a new server, you know, like a piece of critical IT equipment, within, let's say, 4 to 8 hours, which was in the SLA, in the service level agreement, but in real life they had to wait for 6 to 8 weeks. Now this is a whole big problem in itself because once again, you have a false sense of security. It's in that contract, you hope that it will happen or you count on it happening, but in real life you're going to be probably struggling if it's a large-scale disaster. And then the last one, our organization has planned for anything but people issues. Many times I see the business continuity plans just focusing on loss of building or loss of IT systems. Now that is not enough. You know, you can lose critical staff, maybe not that they all go down with the flood, but it's maybe that because they're fatigued or they can't get to work. So critical staff and critical external suppliers and critical voice communication, they're all different parts of your continuity plan if you do it properly. So those scenarios like just buildings or IT, they're not going to just cover for those problems anymore. Now the next one, the last bullet there, is business continuity is all about backup tapes. I mean, this is obviously very, very old-fashioned, and to see, yeah, we actually need more than just the data being backed up, and we also need more than just the systems running somewhere else. You know, it's a real problem that people think, oh, we've got the servers and the applications and data somewhere else. Well, that's not going to help you if you've got an information security incident, for example. Because now your primary and your backup site may be affected by the same virus or hacking incident, you know, or data that's compromised. So you can't really count on that anymore. And it's all a matter of looking at what else do you need. So how do your people, for example, travel to a remote site to then, look at how they can quickly get the process back up and running, you know. So it's not just about the systems and the people and the data and the application. Okay, just this this little update here. We had a massive cyber attack, and this shut down an entire census site, an Australia-wide census, which is a survey of all the residents of Australia. Now, this was a particular DDoS-related attack, and it really affected the reputation of the government. So my question with that kind of thing is, what is the BCP? What is your manual workaround? And these types of questions are not supposed to be answered by IT people. This is the misconception people have. IT doesn't know what the business areas can do manually or as an alternate process. That's why BCP should sit under the corporate umbrella, under the executive management, or at least in some sort of generic department that doesn't report into IT or into HR or into security. It's something on its own, together with risk. Maybe security can fit in there, but they should all be reporting into the CEO or the executive, I would say, because, you know, this is not an IT problem. So what is the BCP? That is our question. Just let me follow up on something here. The next slide, that is our next question, and we'll see if we can get those poll results up after we've done both of these. My next question is, and this is from all our experience that we hear all over the world, what is your biggest business continuity planning frustration? Erika is going to give you a poll to deal with, to respond to. The first answer could be too many pages, too hard to maintain. You know, that's a very common BCP frustration. The next one is no idea if it will work in practice. It's untested. Nobody really has tested this properly. The third answer is our people have not much of a clue on how to act, or worse, we have no plan for people being unavailable. So it's actually, yeah, how comfortable are your people with their role? And if they're not there, who's going to step in? So who's your first, second alternates, for example? And then the next one is 4, many other frustrations not listed. So, you know, you might be thinking about some other things that, that have frustrated you. All right, now we'll see if we can get some results of that as well, and we'll report on that back to you towards the end of the webinar. So hopefully you guys are all responding to this question. Your answer might be number 1, 2, 3, or 4. So it's either too many pages, you can't maintain. 2 is, does it work in practice, we can't test it. 3, people problem. 4, other frustrations. So people, please respond, and hopefully we can get some reports back. Okay, so very importantly now is a best practice framework you can use for business continuity planning. Now, business continuity management is an iterative process. You don't just make it a top-down, tick, 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 done like a project. It has to be embedded. And that's one of the key principles that I use in my work. I don't believe at all you can get a consultant to turn up and to write for 3 months some sort of plan and then hand it back to someone in that organization. This is what I dealt with when I was managing BCP myself, when I was in a commercial bank in Australia, finished up there about 10 years ago. I used to get consultants hoping they would help me implement. Invariably, I'd get some big document, and especially the sort of established firms, I found that they find it's enough to give you a big document, and then you can sort of start from scratch implementing it with your people and with your culture. Now, that is not how this practice should work, we believe. And we really believe in transforming people, really making them capable and equipped with the tools, with the maintenance, with the testing, with the communication, all around that business continuity management process. And that's, a very interesting approach. I'll show you a few examples of that in a minute. I'm going to show you this example here, which is a business continuity team structure you might want to use. and also some risk management steps that we can put in. So the first slide here is showing risk management or information security headaches. And the risk management step, we actually use consequence scenarios, which is the first column here. So impact on staff, buildings, IT, voice communication, or external suppliers. So you can see here the first two displayed. And behind that are the multiple relevant incidents that could cause that particular consequence. So in this case, we're looking at, for example, impact on staff. Well, some of the causes could be illness, could be loss of executives due to some sort of hostage or accident, could be strike, could be other things. And each of those have their own pre-incident controls to reduce likelihood and incident response procedures. So when it happens, what do you quickly have to grab? Now, all these things are specific per incident, but the consequence, the first column here, is what we're going to take to the next level in terms of business continuity planning. So if you can picture it like this, you know, you've got your initial response mechanisms, you know, the fifth column in this matrix. You've got your people safely out of the building, for example, if the building is evacuated. All of that's happening, you know, threat handling procedures, you know, talking to police, all that kind of stuff. These are the short-term response mechanisms you can see here. But then what? You're standing on the street, the phones are ringing in your building, the customers are trying to get their products delivered. What is your plan for that? And that's where most organizations go wrong. They think short-term or preventative, pre-incident controls. They don't really think about the continuity on a longer-term basis to really maintain service levels, reputation, etc., etc. So that's where we use that first column to take to the next steps of business continuity. Now here you can see a couple of sort of links with information security, and I've highlighted here the one terrorist attack or civil unrest. Many times these days you see that terrorist attack links with cyber, so they use certain cyber tools for planning those attacks. Or they use things like social engineering, where they find out where certain people are, what their movements are, and that's what they're going to use when they want to attack a certain organization or a geographical region. So that's where you can see there's a link between security and BCP. The next slide, another couple of examples. Here's the loss of IT scenario. And you can see here, for example, well, virus attacks, hacking, that's all information security related, and that could be some of the causes of bringing down your IT systems. There can be other things like theft of IT equipment, for example, the one above, and you can have probably 30 or 40 of these types of incidents in this scenario, but I'm just highlighting some examples to you where you can see, well, okay, these are some examples of what could cause that particular consequence. Now, all the miscellaneous ones that we sometimes don't make business continuity plans for, but that are still very, very relevant in terms of that information security background are, as you can see here, fraud, industrial espionage, loss or theft of smartphones and laptops and things like this, sensitive data leakage, and then other liability issues, software piracy. There's a lot of potential causes of those consequence scenarios that are related to somehow information security or IT risk. Okay, now here we get to that actual step 3 in terms of the content. The previous one was more about who's involved and how to get the buy-in, but step 3 in here is actually showing the team structure. So what we've got here is an example of how you could work information security into your BCP team roles. This, what you see here, is just the BCP teams. What I'm going to show you in little red circles is where would you place information security people in that process. So a key couple of teams here are the crisis management team. You're seeing your leaders, decision makers in case of an incident. And then you can see those guys are helped on the left-hand side by your damage assessment team. That's the people who actually assess how bad is a certain problem. And on the right-hand side, you can see they're being helped by an executive support team who do, let's say, getting the chargers, getting the laptops plugged in, getting the phones diverted, all that practical stuff. So they're the EAs and admin people. So this is just a little structure there for the phase 1 of the disaster. And then you have another couple of teams if the recovery is being activated, which could be system recovery and support team, business recovery resumption team, and so on and so on. I won't go into the technicalities of all of this. I'm very happy to comment on that if you send me an email or something, but you know, this is just a bit of an outline. Now, if we want to place information security in there, the integration part happens, for example, in your damage assessment team. People who have technical skills and who can assess how bad is the information security damage at this point. Other people in that team are, for example, IT core sort of people. They could be security, facilities, or HR people who are assessing different types of damage. For example, building damage, or could be people damage, if that makes sense. Another example there of information security being aligned with your BCP could be system recovery and support team, as you can see here. So that could have some people in there who are experts on information security, because even in disaster mode and recovery mode, you still have to maintain that information security. And this is where the ISO 27001 comes in, because that basically says, well, you can't just have all your controls working when everything is beautiful, when you've got your building and your systems and your people all there, but in disaster mode, oh, well, just all that stuff goes out the window. That would be a poor practice, right? And Information Security Standard 27001 actually acknowledges that and says, even in disaster mode, you still need to make sure you've got some processes in place to safeguard the information security. Okay, the next step here, and please write those questions to Erita so that we can actually have a Q&A session at the end where you get a bit of an understanding of how I would approach things, and I can answer your questions in a direct way. Yeah, so please keep that in mind. Okay, so step 5 in the picture of this wheel of business continuity would be something to do with business impact analysis. So how would you actually assess how bad certain situations or incidents are? And you could do that in the form of a financial impact analysis, or in different forms, like for example operational impacts, or managerial or compliance impacts, or legal impacts, or reputational impacts. So those are all different types of impacts. And what we try to do in this step is really try to quantify them. Okay, you can see here, the next slide is going to show where all of this comes together. So your critical processes, your key consequence scenarios, and then some of these impacts. So if I know that an impact is really high after a few hours, I will make that my tolerable period of disruption. So if I know after 2 hours or 1 day or 3 days, I'm going to have unacceptable impacts due to a particular incident, then that will mean I'm going to use that, you know, to say, hey, this is the maximum tolerable period of disruption, and also use that to make decisions on whether or not we should declare a disaster or not. So this is really important to tackle properly. Now, this picture here, I hope you can see the writing at the top and on the left there. On the top, you can see those consequence scenarios that we had in the previous risk matrix. So loss of staff, loss of building, loss of IT, loss of voice communication, loss of external supplier, for example. And then on the left-hand side, some time-critical processes. Now, the first couple, they are time-critical no matter when. This means any time of the day, month, year that it happens, we're actually going to be affected. So, for example, picking up the phone from customers ringing in, or order processing and delivery, you might say that that is always time-critical. Then you might have some time-critical processes that are only time-critical certain times during the month. For example, payroll, paying your staff. Now, this is just an example for a manufacturing company. Now, what's so interesting is then when you look at these little boxes, and in a simple form, readable by senior as well as junior people, in layman's terms, a description of your initial or manual workarounds, and then the longer-term continuity provision. And that's where that timing comes in, the 2 weeks or whatever it might be. Here it's 2 business days, the next one you can see 4 weeks. There's all different timings. We recommend only having 3 timings maximum in that particular, in that framework, because we often see people documenting so many time frames. What's the impact after 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, 16 hours? And in real life, after documenting it once, not being maintained, and people don't follow any of that stuff when there's a real disaster. So IT and facilities are going to give people best effort, what they sort of need, but I don't think they're ever going to follow all that 1, 2, 3, 4 hour kind of approach. So we recommend just one of them being really short-term, basing that on the particular process that needs quick permanent solution or continuity provisions. Now in this case it might be responding to the phone inquiries, and if you look at scenario 4 here, that would be if it's disrupted with voice communication, you might have a strategy to put up a web notice that the phone system is down and encourage email communication. And that can last for 2 business days, and then maybe the next level would be diversion by the phone company to home phones or mobiles, whichever are available. So in here you can see your full continuity strategy, that's the longer term one, and then also the initial manual workaround. And all of that for each scenario and for each process. So whilst you might think, oh yeah, this is just another template, this has taken us 15 years to develop. We've been tweaking this thing forever and a day, because what our recognition was, all the departments, they have big documents for BCP, VIA, lots and lots of pages, black text on white paper, but how many have been validated by senior level people who can actually really make sense of it and who can tell, is this the right level of investment in this particular provision? And that's why we kept on pulling together something that you can present across the board to anyone in the organization to say, have we got it right? Is there maybe some mistake in there? Should we invest better in some provisions? And that's what that slide is all about. So really, to put it in one page, we call it BCP on a page. And here you can see zoomed in a couple of more examples if you had trouble reading the previous one. Here you can see, for example, order processing and delivery. If we don't have our building, let's say the building is flooded or it's inaccessible, there's no access to that, up to 2 weeks this organization says, if we need to process orders, what we're going to do is inform customers of the delays. We're going to give them free promotional items to compensate for the reduced service levels, and we think that those customers are okay with that. You might have organizations that can perfectly handle that particular challenge because 2 weeks for them may be quite acceptable. Now over 2 weeks they're going to say they're going to redirect products from alternate locations and find new warehouse, etc., which is a more complex solution. So this is just an example. You might have 4 hours or you might have 1 week or something in there, but as an example, the structure hopefully is clear with all of you guys. Okay, next slide. The continuity provisions, based on all of that, you might have something here, and this is especially for the IT people in the room, in the virtual room. This is mapping out your shared IT and facilities requirements based on the previous slide. So you can see here up to, let's say, 2 days, which departments, as you see here on the top, need that particular resource on the left. So it could be comfortable seating, could be access to a phone, could be access to the SAP system, could be all sorts of things. And what we then put in there is how many staff in each department need that particular provision within that particular time frame. So for example, if I see this as an IT person, I can see, okay, within 2 days, we only have to deliver that solution to, in this case, 8 people in marketing and 5 people in IT, and that's 13 in total, and that's all the people that need a desk, for example, or a particular workstation. So this brings together the entire overview for IT and facilities on how to prioritize recovery during an actual incident. And it's so beautiful because it's pre-agreed. In the case of a real incident, you know, it's not going to be a discussion again. These things are a big discussion before you even get to an incident, let alone in the actual situation of an incident. So all of this you want to agree before it happens, because in the real incident you're not going to have the time to do it. A couple of final slides here. The BCP activation toolkit, that's something that we developed because we recognize people don't want to dig through 500 pages when there's a real disaster. They can't find the right page. But they can't maintain it. So what we are doing here is the initial response mechanisms. All these little bubbles are actually clickable in the live version of our particular framework. So we have a pre-populated kit that has all of this draft material in it. and saves people months and months of time developing from scratch. So this is what our main intellectual property is. Companies sometimes purchase this or they want us with it, and what we do is basically populate all these little bits, and as you can see in the toolkit format, all these little items are structured based by phase. So when are they needed? Yeah, so that's another sort of example. You can see here the assessment tools, BCP copies, where can I find a copy of my plans, media and community liaison, contact details there, or crisis control room setup. They're part of the activation phase. And in the next phase, you can see other examples like full departmental continuity plans, alternate work locations, things like that. So hopefully that gives you a different flavor, because most BCPs are looking pretty boring, you know, and we believe the more juicy it looks, the more it's going to be used by people and the more it's going to be accepted. Okay, the final slide here, step 8, testing, rehearsals and training and awareness. Very, very important, you know, to have that tackled. I'm going to show you a little video at the end of the webinar, which is coming up soon, you know, to show that this is really, really critical to get your awareness organized and make sure that people know what they're doing, because people will make mistakes if they haven't practiced it, and you can't blame them. You know, you have to make sure that that the right people are to blame for that, and that's, in my view, the BCP coordinators if they haven't trained everybody properly. Sorry about the slides, hopefully that's clear now. So that was step 8. Okay, our key differences before we wrap up and give you guys some opportunities to ask questions. Key difference with the traditional approach: we have internal capacity building. BCP we only do in the form of internal teams in an organization participating and really understanding the process. And these are people, we call them the Fantastic Four, could be Fabulous Five, but something like that number, and who are actually not permanent BCP or DR employees. They are people who work in other areas of the business, maybe HR or facilities or some of the time-critical processes, marketing, sales, whatever it is that's critical. We build a team based on a number of people together that all maybe spend 10% of each of those people's time. The dynamic framework I showed you. Another key principle is consequence-based planning, which is the outcome-based consequence scenarios that I showed you. Catering for fatigue, unavailability of staff, so making sure there's plans for that. Top-down approach based on the processes that I showed you in the BCP on the page. Strong focus on communication and notification planning, including pool communication, which is people actually asking for it rather than you just blasting out SMSs and things like that. Color-coded matrix-style documents, including BCP on a page. Hyperlinking and utilizing what's already there in your business. Don't duplicate stuff. And then the toolkit approach that I showed you, and optimally using agreed manual or initial workarounds to actually document and test them as well. The last one, prioritize, prioritize, and prioritize. So be selective to reduce the workload in real disasters. Okay, now we've got a little video here that I'm going to play for you. Now, I can't hear anybody laughing, but I always laugh at this one because, you know, this is the poor guy who wasn't trained in the disaster response plan, and that guy can't help it, you know. And that's the whole idea, that you actually do try and make sure your process is properly tested and made aware amongst all the staff, because you can't blame staff for doing the wrong thing if they haven't actually been trained properly. Okay, oops, that's a bit more music for you. Then the next slide is handing over to Erita, talking about training courses and the process. The 27001 is not in here, but that's also something that links with my topic. I'll hand over to Evita to follow up with that.
Thank you, Rinske, for this excellent and informative presentation. We are honored to have you as a presenter. So before we proceed with question and answer session, I would like to inform all the attendees that PCB provides training and certification services for ISO 22301 Introduction, Foundation, Lead Implementer, and Lead Auditor. This training is designed to provide you with the required knowledge on how to continue to operate efficiently within a shorter period of time. A PCB certificate will demonstrate your dedication in implementing and managing these processes and frameworks, and most importantly, you will be recognized worldwide. For more information, please visit our website pcb.com/training. So we will go now with the first question. One attendee wrote, "We have business continuity plan to recovery few services by using geo-separated disaster recovery solutions. Those systems consist of big capacity storages. We conform to business objective RTO, RPO by using cluster with synchronized replications between main and spare site. In case of damage of data, example a hack, attack, or logic issue, we will not be able to recover it on time, RTO, because data is huge and recovery from backup takes time. So what should we do? How treat that and confirm the RTO?"
Well, what should we do? RTOs are unfortunately often driven by and asked by IT from the business. The business doesn't necessarily have done their proper assessment themselves of, first of all, how critical is each process. Assuming that they have, my next question is still, what is the business's initial workarounds? So assuming that there's a gap between what they need, how quickly they need it, and the realistic smart RTOs, as in the achievable RTOs, or recovery time objectives, assuming there's a gap, the business should have initial workarounds prepared. So that's my first comment there. And I guess the next comment is, if there's a gap, they should invest in improving that. So if you're saying, look, we've got these huge volumes of data, we don't have the capacity to actually, or the ability to actually recover quickly and soon enough, well, that's a question for the business then to say, how willing are you to invest in improving that? So that's one answer to that question. But it's a very interesting and very common one, so happy to have more chats about that with that person. And by the way, here you can see my contact details, so if you can link in with me, that would be great. There's only one person with my details on the planet, so hopefully that gives you the idea.
Thank you, Rinske, for this answer. We will now go with the next question. As a construction company, what format would you put your business continuity plan in place in the tender or project execution document to the funding company or government institution?
What you're asking about the whole business continuity plan, as in what would be the plan? That would be something to assess. You can't just pull that out of a hat, I think. That's my first response. But construction companies, strategic arrangements around that in terms of BCP strategies, my experience is that you can do a huge amount by doing reciprocal arrangements. Now, if you can find a non-competitive party that uses a similar sort of equipment, similar sort of construction materials, similar kind of processes to transport those materials, you can do, well, you can make memorandums of understanding, for example, that actually helps you and helps the other party if they have a problem as well. So it's one of those things that you'd have to negotiate over time, and yeah, we've done that negotiation for quite a few of our clients where we made up some sort of process where it was a reciprocal arrangement between two parties. Because your BCP would be way too expensive otherwise. If you had to have a recovery for all your transport, your warehouses, your building materials, things like that, it's not a justifiable investment, I think.
Thank you, Rinske, for this answer. Because of the time limitation, the next questions will be answered through email by the presenter. We will now, I will now show the result of the polls. Okay, so can you see them?
can't see them at the moment. I don't know if all the other guys. So the result of the polls is, the first question was only 20% said we've tested the plan, we know what to do, and the 60% that followed said we would struggle, but we would sort of manage. So that means 80% of respondents said we are not happy to really have this problem, and 20% said we have really nothing in place. So 80% would struggle, 20% would really struggle. Yeah, that's I think the conclusion from what I can read here. Now let's see the other poll. I can see the second one. We can see here the second one is coming up. The biggest frustrations in BCP. Well, the people factor gets 40% from you guys. We get 17% saying too many pages and too hard to maintain, and 14% saying, oh, we can't really test it, or we haven't tested it. And then 30% says many other frustrations. So that brings us to the end of the webinar, I think. And these results don't really surprise me. So please link up with me on LinkedIn. You can see here the articles that the posts that I've published so far. They're obviously freely available to you. And I look forward to meeting you hopefully in Canada next year, where I'll be presenting an interactive session. And it's going to be really exciting because I've never been to Canada, and I hope to see you guys in the international conference. I think well, it's in Montreal, so it's going to be really interesting.
Once again, thank you, Rinske, for this excellent and informative presentation. I really enjoyed this webinar, and I hope that all the attendees enjoyed it as well. I want to thank all the attendees who have joined us today. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. Please be informed that this webinar is recorded, and we will upload it on our official YouTube channel and in our website, pcb.com. Also, we will upload the slides in our SlideShare account, in where you can view the slides as well. Goodbye, everyone, and I wish you all a good day.
Thank you.